Hi, my name is Katie May, and this is the Baby May podcast. In this episode, I wanted to talk about my traditional tattoos. And to be specific, they're my Inuit tattoos. So when I'm talking about traditional tattoos, I'm coming exclusively from that lens of Nunavut-based Inuit tattoos. I'm really proud of my tattoos. If you know me, if you follow the Instagram for this podcast, you can see that I have facial tattooing. I have tattoos on my hands. I'm always going to be adding tattoos because I just want to be covered in tattoos. There is a print collection made by Jermaine Anaktoyok. Sorry if I have mispronounced that. There is a collection of prints of Inuit women with tattoos all over their arms and body and their face. And I love the print. And growing up, I saw a lot of depictions of Sedna, who is an Inuit legend. She has a very vital role when it comes to Inuit spirituality and storytelling. And when I saw prints of Sedna and many other Inuit women and legends from stories that I grew up listening to, I saw a lot of tattoos on these women. And throughout my life, I just knew that I wanted to get these, but I was very shy to talk about them because when I was younger, I very much got the impression that it was kind of like a hush-hush topic. Like people didn't really want to talk about traditional tattoos. And at that time, I couldn't really understand, but I think as I've grown up and learned about internalized shame and racism, especially with the effects of residential school and the colonization process of all of this country, there's a lot of things that were kind of washed over and were told to be forgotten and left behind. One thing, I can't remember if I read this or if I heard about it from someone, but when it came to the Inuit legend of shamans and other creatures of the land, there's legends of giants and many other kinds of spirits. And I remember hearing that once the North was colonized by the government and there was more missionaries coming up, these spirits and beliefs did not necessarily go away, but they went underground and have been deeply buried underground where we cannot see them. We think they're not there, but they are deep down. When I heard that, that really connected with me because that is mainly how I was able to come to terms with a lot of the internalized shame that I have with my identity, being mixed and being Inuk. I know that that was very much a taught behavior. And it's not something that I just carry. I can recognize it throughout my family. Not everyone in my family, but I think everyone in my family, and I would say everyone in the communities, have been affected by these things. I think that's fair to say. As I've become older and I got my traditional tattoos, the more I feel that feeling of something being buried deep down. And even though you can't see it around you, you know that it's there. That's kind of how I felt about learning about my culture, learning about my family, and the history of Inuit. It feels very natural, and I think that's the feeling that has been buried deep down, something that comes naturally. That feeling that is buried deep down and is kind of suppressed by a lot of taught behavior, like I talked about shame. And I guess I'm bringing that feeling of pride, that feeling of intuition, connecting with my culture and connecting with myself, that is resurfacing as I dig for it. And I am digging through this shame. I'm working through it. It's very hard. I feel like working through it is something that feels necessary because this thing that I'm talking about that's buried deep down, it feels, like I said, it feels intuitive and it makes me feel like I can freely be myself more and freely experience my culture in a way that doesn't I don't have to encounter shame, like people trying to shame me or me internalizing shame. as I experience cultural learning and practices, especially with my family members. I want to feel freely about doing these things. And what helps me with that is my traditional tattoos. And one thing I love about my traditional tattoos is that, like, every time I get one, myself and others around me say, like, it looks like it was always there. And that's just how I feel. Each design that I have gotten, it feels intuitive. It feels like it was already there by the time I get it. It is a way for me to really feel deeply connected with myself and my culture. I did a previous recording talking about tattoos, and it was going to be this episode, but now what you're listening to, I'm redoing. And it's because I kind of was on a rant about, as proud as I am when white people come up to me, especially now that I'm down south, they can be quite insensitive and kind of berate me and make me feel obligated and really push me to, like, answer their questions about my tattoos and explain myself, explain my tattoos, which is, like, very hard to do on the spot, very hard to do with a stranger. And, like, the way that they, like, are pushy and just obligate me so that, like, they have a better understanding of my people and my culture. That's usually the explanation. Like, they're like, no, tell me so I understand. And yeah, they kind of, like, corner me in a sense. Not that I, like, feel in danger per se. Sometimes though, like, part of the obligation of talking to these people who ask me these questions and, like, invade my privacy, part of me is definitely worried about the reaction if I do say no and then I refrain from talking to them. Like, maybe they will get mad and, like, really, like, actually corner me, which is, like, I don't know. I haven't had that experience before, but it's just something that I am afraid of because the pushiness of these people that I'm talking about is, like, I don't know, it's beyond me and it is really invasive. If you don't know me, if you don't know me, I don't know if I really want to be approached if the only thing you want to talk about is my tattoos before getting to know me at all. But if your response to my tattoos is curiosity, I encourage you to just Google Inuit tattoos, Google indigenous tattoos, and get to learn about how there's all kinds of different cultural tattoos, not just for Inuit, but, like, for many different people and cultures around the world. And it's all very interesting to learn about, and you can learn about it online. And I don't have to be the one explaining to you as a stranger where you're taking up my time when I had no expectation of, like, using my time in this way. You can just learn about that yourself. That's what I want to say to these people. But usually my response, just because I feel so awkward and obligated and a little intimidated, is that I do explain myself, but I try to be as concise and brief about it. Like, I don't want to, like, actually explain myself to these people. I don't even, like, talk about the meanings of my tattoos to many people in my family or people close to me. I've talked about my tattoos to some of the tattoo artists who've done my tattoos, but that's not usually because they berate me with questions. It's more so because I feel like when I'm with them during the appointment, or if I actually know them before the appointment, because I've had friends do my tattoos as well, I get into the designs and the meanings of the designs. I tell them why. It's not because they asked me, it's usually because I feel welcomed by their presence, by their energy. They're willing to do the tattoos that I'm asking for and help me achieve the look that feels natural and intuitive for myself. I'm really, really happy and proud about these tattoos that I have and that I will be having. The people who've done them are all incredible. I love I love every single experience that I've had so far. I guess, like, I get pretty defensive about my tattoos because they are so personal. And I guess for those who are listening who may not be Inuit, I know I said that white people ask me those kind of invasive, rude questions, but that's mostly because that's exclusively been my experience so far with strangers. They've all been white people. When it comes to my experience with people who are native or Inuit as well, usually it's not invasive at all, actually. Like it's quite endearing, and they're very kind, and at times give me compliments. The one thing that like makes me feel very touched and honored was that one time this man in Thunder Bay, he said that it makes him happy to see someone who shows honor to their culture and pride to their culture in such a bold way, right on the face. You can't ignore it. And that was a very kind compliment to receive because, yeah, it is on my face. You can't ignore it. If you're looking at me, you're looking at my tattoos. And that's how I want it. I am quite defensive about them. I am quite honored because they are a very sacred part of myself. And yeah, I wanted to make an episode talking about tattoos, partly because, like, I wanted to get into what they mean to me. I really won't get into the specifics of what my actual tattoos mean. That's kind of too personal to put on this podcast. But a lot of the tattoos that I've had, they are like tattoos that I get after some time of learning about regional tattoos, like the history of how tattoos were done, and learning about what tattoos mean during this revitalization movement that's been happening for quite some time. And I'm really happy with like the momentum that it like that's happening with it. Like from what I was learning with the history of tattoos, like it just seemed like a lot of Inuit women and men seem to have tattoos with many different meanings that are about which region they're from, which family that they're from, their personal achievements, like for hunters or for sowers, like just these kind of life milestones you would represent with tattoos. I think that is something that I find really special. I think I find physical symbolism to be a really important thing in my life, and the tattoos really help me with that, symbolizing what I've gone through in my life and the history of myself and my family. I really want to be upfront about that and remind myself of where I come from and who I am. These tattoos really solidify how I feel about myself. I've had some hesitation when it comes to getting them. I know that I have like quite a bit of them already. And like I said, I want to plan on getting more, but like initially I was hesitant because yeah, like it was a hush hush kind of topic when I was younger, and it was actually quite hard to learn about. And I think the reason why I get defensive about it is because like it did take quite some time and quite some effort for me to learn about these tattoos and the cultural meanings and history. And for people to come up to me, strangers especially, like, I don't know, to come up to me and just ask me to explain myself, explain my tattoos, explain my culture as if it's something that I can just summarize in just a couple minutes. No, like these are cultural experiences and learning like opportunities that I had to wait for, and I didn't get them all in one go. These are teachings that I've been learning throughout my life and I will continue to be learning about. And if you really want to get to learning about it, like I said, you should start with doing online research. If there's people within your community that you know, emphasize that you know, you know them, ask them if they feel comfortable talking about traditional tattoos because you would like to learn. And be upfront that like you would like to learn, but don't obligate them to teach you. I think that's a really important thing that like you can't obligate people to teach you. That's not how it works. If you're wanting to learn, there are people who do want to teach, but that's not everyone. Not everyone wants to talk about it, and that's okay. You should get at where their comfort level is at and try to work from there on. I think that curiosity is definitely appropriate, and that's okay. Like, I'm not saying people shouldn't be curious and try to learn about these things. I just think that there are appropriate ways to learn about these things and not be so rude about it. If people think that I'm being rude about it, I don't think I'm being rude. There's a lot of Inuit who feel similarly to me and have a lot of experiences similarly to mine. usually, again, just like white people for the most part that I remember at the top of my head who are coming up to Inuit and just kind of demanding cultural teachings without showing any sign of like respect. Because, like, for those who are Indigenous or work with Indigenous people and communities, you may know of protocols, cultural protocols. I had never been specifically told that there is some sort of protocol with Inuit to like provide an offering. It's never been specifically categorized as a protocol, but it's definitely something that I have learned culturally through subtext. And if I want to learn something from my grandfather, I usually provide food or some sort of offering of like, let me help you tidy up or let me get gas or something like that. Like, just sort of something that does convenience them and shows that like you are invested in them and them teaching you what you want to learn. I just think that's kind of the protocol that is kind of commonly shared throughout Indigenous groups. I definitely understand that white people not like may not understand that, but like perhaps I'm saying this because like I know I grew up with the cultural context of protocols and things like that. But I would not ask someone for cultural knowledge or things like that that are so personal and so sacred without providing any sort of offering or gift or like I don't know, like I just think that that's kind of rude, especially if they're a stranger, especially if I'm demanding them to tell me right here right now. That's just not something I would do. I don't find that appropriate. It's quite rude. I don't think that that's the way that like people should be asking to learn because I think for myself and perhaps maybe others, but I won't speak for others, it may turn me off. Like I don't want to talk about that with you and you're making me feel weird. And even though I do kind of talk about it with you, that's mostly because I want you to go away. If you're wanting to learn about Inuit and how to, I guess, be like an ally or like to like I guess familiarize yourself with the history of this country, I don't think that that approach is necessarily going to get you to where you want to be. Like I'm assuming that people want to be an ally, and to me an ally is supporting marginalized people who have been underrepresented, misrepresented, and supporting them in ways that they are asking for and not obligating the marginalized people to be doing all the heavy lifting. When it comes to working on these kind of social issues and like being able to work together as a community, I think it is kind of required for people who have been quite appropriately represented, perhaps even overrepresented, to I think it's appropriate for them to take a bit more of a heavy workload to learn in ways that are appropriate and respectful and to spread awareness again like in ways that are appropriate and respectful. I think a way that could bring awareness as a non-indigenous person when it comes to learning about traditional tattoos, just saying like, hey, I googled this and I found these websites that like interviewed Inuit or like are made by Inuit. Like make sure that Inuit are involved with actually the process of making these articles and projects. Like yeah, like you want to make sure that these are coming from Inuit voices. And just like I guess share that. And if other non-indigenous people are interested, they may watch it because of your suggestion and they won't feel like they need to go up to people like me and demand their attention and explanation. And I think there also should be some learning about protocols. If you have like never heard of protocols when it comes to indigenous cultures, I encourage you to try and learn about that as well. You can learn about that online. Again, make sure the information that you're trying to receive is coming from indigenous sources because that's just how you know it's probably going to be most accurate because it's coming from it's like this indigenous knowledge is coming from indigenous people. And at times you're going to have to see that it's getting really specific. Inuit tattoos, like I said, could be regional. My tattoos probably don't necessarily mean the same thing as someone who has similar tattoos, but they're from the Kivalliq region. That's a different region than mine. For people who are from other indigenous groups. There are some similar designs like chin tattoos. I see that across some indigenous groups are non-Inuit, and I would emphasize that like if you see someone who has a chin tattoo, perhaps they're not Inuit, perhaps they are of a different group. And if you want to learn about that, I think if you learn about protocols and you kind of approach the person in a way that's like, hey, my name is blah, 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 blah. I noticed your tattoos and I was wondering if you feel comfortable talking to me about where you're from. If not, I totally understand. I hope this doesn't make you feel uncomfortable. I am just curious. I think, like, personally, for myself, I think that's something like if someone came up to me like that, I would feel all right talking a little bit about myself and my tattoos. Not a whole lot, just a bit enough for them to like perhaps do some further research on their own. But yeah, like I think that is an example of a respectful approach. Usually people have asked me, the people who are really pushy, they asked me either on the street or at bars. And sometimes, sometimes when I'm at a bar, I'm like, can you get me fries now? After I told them about my tattoos. And usually I've gotten a response, yes, I've gotten some fries. They didn't necessarily know that they were following through with protocol afterwards, but I kind of made sure that, like, some of these pushy people did kind of somewhat follow protocol in some way. I don't know. I don't think it really counts because, like, I was still uncomfortable and they still obligated me. But, like, I don't know. At least I got fries out of it. And I don't know. Like, I think another reason why I might be defensive about my tattoos is because, like, there are some Inuit that I've met, including, like, some people in my family who are uncomfortable with my tattoos and kind of, like, would prefer me to not have them. A lot of my family and people in my community have definitely been really supportive, and I am very happy about that. But yeah, like, there's some people who are uncomfortable with my tattoos. I usually don't take offense to that because I can understand. Again, there's a lot of taught shame, and there's a lot of things that, like, people were taught that, like, you should not do that. That is something that, like, the devil does, or things like that. It was just taught, like, that's just not a thing that you do anymore. That's just not for Inuit anymore. And even though I am working against that narrative, I understand that that is a narrative that was deeply ingrained for a lot of Inuit, and they are uncomfortable. They don't really want to see it. They don't really want to talk about it. And I don't really have an opinion on that. I can kind of understand. Like, I kind of get it. Like, I wouldn't want to push them. And again, those people aren't usually pushy towards me. They're not as pushy as the strangers that I've talked about. So traditional tattoos are a very complicated subject because there's just a lot of taught shame that was passed down through generations. And for a while, it actually wasn't something that Inuit did. Like, I know that there was Inuit who did it throughout the years and things like that. Like, a lot of Inuit stopped getting these tattoos. And when I talked about the revitalization movement, it was always kind of there. Like, there was always Inuit getting tattoos and things like that. Like, not as many as before. And for quite some time, it's kind of the snowball effect where more Inuit seem to be talking about it, more Inuit seem to be openly getting tattoos and sharing their experience. I am happy to post what my tattoos look like on my my personal Instagram, the podcast Instagram. I drew some of the photos of me when I was little with my tattoos that I have now. There's some photos of me now. I'm very open about my tattoos, but I guess, yeah, like I said, getting into what my tattoos mean, that's a little too personal. I guess, like, as long as it's the right environment with people that I feel comfortable with, I'm always happy to get into it and talk about some cultural learnings and get into my tattoos. Yeah, like, I would definitely be open to that. And I guess it's kind of like me being a bit open to the public and also kind of like saying, like, hey, I don't like some of the experiences that I've had. And if you're not Inuit, I do encourage you to learn how to respectfully approach Inuit and other people with traditional tattoos. Because yeah, like I hope now you understand that like this is quite a sensitive subject. Yeah, I really wanted to make an episode on this. It was a really hard episode for me to do, but I knew that it's just something I just had to do it. And I'm very happy with what I just done. I hope you've enjoyed the episode. And yeah, like if you want to learn about tattoos, I'm most definitely encourage you to do that. And I'm always so happy to see people in my family, like my little brother, and people like my friends and other people in all these communities getting traditional tattoos or talking about them, and people who make art with tattoos on these like characters that they draw. It's so beautiful. It's so wonderful. I'm so happy to see it all. And I encourage more and more of it. And I encourage for people to learn. I encourage people to feel like it's something that if you're uncomfortable with it and you want to learn how to not be so uncomfortable, like I encourage you to do that self exploration and cultural exploration. Like learn what works for you. Going through the uncomfortability is definitely hard and awkward, but it feels so rewarding. And I feel like with myself and my tattoos and my cultural learnings, I feel fulfilled and I feel like I am more in touch with myself and my intuition. So, yes, I encourage this for anyone. For people who are not Indigenous, if you're not Inuk, don't get Inuit tattoos. Don't do that. If you're a part of a group of people who have traditional tattoos, I encourage you to learn about it. If you want to get them, yeah, learn about it. If you want to get it, sure. If you don't come from a group of people who don't have traditional tattoos, and you're looking at Inuit or other groups of people with tattoos and say, I want to get that, don't do that. Don't do that. I encourage people to learn about this, learn about it in a respectful way. Thank you so much for listening. This has been the Baby May podcast. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.